My shop is very unique. We do things differently here. For us, it's all about making them as stylish and beautiful as they can be.
When Counting Cars vanished from history after its 10th season, fans were left with more questions than answers.
The best cars in the world are entered into this show. And there are a special group that's called the Great Eight. The top 8 cars in the industry, the top 8 cars in the world. That is an absolute honor. The judges...
Danny Koker and his crew had spent years turning forgotten cars into head-turning customs. But behind those finished builds was a side of Count's Customs the television rarely showed. Now, years after the show ended, Danny Koker is finally revealing the reason Counting Cars ended. So what really happened to one of history's most recognizable automotive series? And why did it disappear without a clear explanation? Join us as we uncover the real reason Counting Cars came to an end.
I'm looking constantly. I'm looking everywhere, man. I'm turning over rocks. I'm digging in people's backyards. I'm peeking in garage doors. I'm never stopping, never stopping. I have a custom 67 Cadillac hearse that I completely hot rodded out, and my own custom coffin, and I would take 6 guys and they would carry me into a place. They would take, load me out of the hearse.
When things started falling apart. For 10 seasons, Counting Cars gave viewers a front-row seat to the world of Danny the Count Koker and his team at Count's Customs. What began as a Pawn Stars spin-off in 2012 grew into one of history's longest-running automotive reality shows, following Danny and his crew as they hunted down classic cars and motorcycles, rebuilt them, and turned worn-out machines into custom rides. Danny's connection to history actually began before Counting Cars existed. He had already appeared on Pawn Stars as an expert who helped the Harrison family identify and value unusual vehicles. Those appearances gave viewers their first regular look at the man behind Count's Customs. So, when history gave him his own series, the show did not have to introduce Danny from scratch. Viewers already knew him from Pawn Stars, while Count's Customs provided a real workshop where the new series could build its stories. That connection helped turn a familiar face into the center of an entirely new show. By the time Counting Cars Season 10 arrived, the series had produced 160 episodes. Then, almost as quietly as it had become a television staple, Counting Cars stopped. Season 10 premiered on September 15th, 2021, and for a while, there was nothing unusual about it. Danny was still buying cars, the crew was still taking on ambitious restorations, and familiar faces were still appearing in the shop. But the season lasted only 10 episodes, with the final installment, Danny's Dream Benz, aired on December 1, 2021. That episode followed Danny as he finally restored his late father's rare 1982 Mercedes-Benz 500S EC-AMG, while Ryan and Bob worked on a Dodge Challenger. Then came the silence. There was no dramatic finale announcing that the shop was closing, or an episode telling viewers that they were watching the end of an era. The show simply stopped producing new episodes after Season 10, leaving fans to wonder whether it had actually been canceled, quietly ended, or was simply waiting for another season to begin. That uncertainty opened the door to plenty of theories. Some pointed toward changes within the cast. Others questioned whether problems surrounding Count's Customs had affected the series. Then there were the legal disputes and controversies involving people connected to the shop, along with questions about the direction of the production itself. Hanging over all of it was Danny Koker. After years of running a business, filming a television series, and maintaining other professional interests, people began asking one question. Had the demands of Counting Cars finally become too much? However, the end of Counting Cars was not simply a matter of one person leaving or one controversy bringing everything down. By the time the final season aired, there had already been changes around the show that longtime viewers could notice. Some familiar faces were no longer part of the story. The dynamics inside Count's Kustoms had shifted, and the series was no longer operating in exactly the same way it had during its earlier years. So, which of those changes really caused the end to the show? And what was really going on inside Count's Kustoms while the show was still on the air? The subtle signs behind the scenes. By the time Counting Cars reached its later seasons, the show had changed in ways that were easy to miss if you were only watching for the cars. In the beginning, much of its appeal came from the tight group at Count's Kustoms. Danny Koker was at the center, but the personalities around him gave the shop its character. Kevin Mack handled business operations. Ryan Evans became the lead painter and creative force, while Horny Mike, Shannon Eichow, and others brought their own skills and personalities to the screen. But that lineup did not stay the same. Some of the familiar faces from the early seasons gradually left the show. Scott Jones, who worked as the shop's business manager, was one of them. He appeared in the earlier seasons but was no longer part of the regular cast later on. Rolly Sabo, the beloved detailer known for his meticulous work and on-screen charisma, also departed. Known for his sharp attention to detail and engaging presence, his reduced on-screen appearances were noticeable. Allegedly, his trailer was stolen, and he lost a lot of money he had invested in the equipment stored in the trailer. His exit followed season 6, and was, however, framed publicly as a personal decision. By season 8, the main faces had changed, with Danny, Kevin, Mike, Ryan, and Shannon taking on bigger roles. By season 10, those names were still around, but the show felt different from what viewers had seen in the beginning. And the focus was no longer as much on the close-knit group that had made the early seasons so popular. The format itself also evolved. Early Counting Cars episodes often revolved around Danny finding a vehicle, negotiating for it, bringing it into the shop, and watching the crew transform it. There were customer builds, unexpected discoveries, and plenty of interaction between the team members. But as the seasons progressed, the show expanded its scope. Episodes began featuring celebrity clients, unusual restoration challenges, and projects that took the crew outside the normal rhythm of the shop. Season 8, for example, had the team recreating the famous Captain America motorcycle from Easy Rider, visiting SEMA, and traveling to Detroit for the Autorama. The series was still about cars, but the storytelling had become broader and more event-driven. These changes kept the series fresh, but they also meant that Counting Cars was gradually becoming more of a produced television experience rather than a simple look inside Danny's daily business. Then came another noticeable change. The gaps between seasons became much longer. The first several seasons arrived in relatively quick succession. Season 1 premiered in 2012, followed by seasons 2 and 3 in 2013 and 2014. Season 8 also premiered on July 2018, while Season 9 did not arrive until June 2020. That increasingly irregular release pattern marked a clear change from the pace of its early run. These changes showed that the show was not quite the same anymore, but behind the scenes, even bigger problems were starting to emerge, and some would become much more serious than simple changes to the show's format. The problems that rocked Count's Kustoms. The problems around Count's Kustoms did not begin when Counting Cars reached its final season. Some had been built years earlier, and several involved people viewers had come to recognize from the show. One of the earliest major problems came from a dispute that directly involved a customer. In 2014, Jeanette and Paul Hurt filed a lawsuit against Count's Kustoms over a 1967 Ford Mustang they had paid to have restored. According to their complaint, they paid $50,000 for the project after being told that the car would be rebuilt and potentially featured on Counting Cars. The couple later alleged that the restoration had not progressed as promised and that the vehicle they received had problems. Their lawsuit sought the money back. The case was especially damaging to the image of a shop that had built its television reputation around delivering spectacular transformations. But then, another problem struck much closer to the business itself. Joseph Frontiera had joined Counts Kustoms in 2013 in an accounting role. In 2016, the company sued him, alleging that more than $75,000 in company funds had been used for personal expenses, including a Range Rover and airline tickets. The lawsuit also alleged that Joseph Frontiera had used signature stamps resembling those of Danny Koker and Kevin Mack to authorize checks without their knowledge. Counts Kustoms further claimed that missed tax payments had resulted in an $18,000 IRS penalty. Joseph disputed the allegations in court, and the case turned into a lengthy legal battle. Court records show that the dispute continued for years through motions and other proceedings. But the controversy created another problem for counting cars: confusion among viewers. Because Joseph Frontiera was connected to the show, some reports about the case were shared online alongside photos of other cast members. Ryan Evans was even wrongly identified by some fans as the employee accused of misusing the company's money. He was not. The employee named in Counts Kustoms' lawsuit was Joseph Frontiera, and that was only part of the turbulence surrounding the show. As familiar faces disappeared and the business dealt with legal disputes and customer complaints, the version of Counts Kustoms that viewers saw on television became harder to separate from the real business operating behind the cameras. What these controversies did create, however, was a trail of disruption around a show that depended heavily on the personalities, relationships, and credibility of the people inside that shop. But while those controversies were putting pressure on the world around Counts Kustoms, Danny was dealing with a different kind of strain. After years of juggling the shop, filming, and everything else that came with being the Count, Danny could no longer keep up. Why Danny Koker finally had enough. For years, Danny Koker made the impossible schedule look easy. He was running Counts Kustoms, filming counting cars, dealing with customers, building cars and motorcycles, and still finding time for music. But behind the relaxed smile was a schedule that could be brutal. Danny knew that pressure long before Counting Cars became a decade-long television series. In a 2012 interview, while filming the show's second season, he said the production involved serious long hours and several consecutive days of shooting. At the time, he had already spent weeks filming almost every day and was preparing to continue directly into another season. He admitted it was a lot of work, although he also said he loved what he was doing. Meanwhile, that workload did not become any lighter as his career expanded. Danny was not simply the face of a television show. Counts Kustoms was a real business, and the television production was only one part of his life. He also had Counts 77, his rock band, which had been active before the show and continued performing while Counting Cars was being filmed. In a 2014 interview, Danny explained that he would film the show 5 days a week and then fly out for band performances on weekends. He described the schedule as a constant challenge because the television production limited how much time he could spend touring. Nevertheless, the pressure on Danny's business did not end when the cameras stopped rolling. Counts Kustoms also had to deal with problems outside the garage, including a wave of fraudulent advertisements that used Danny's name and image without permission. Fake CBD promotions circulated online, falsely suggesting that Danny had endorsed or recommended the products. The ads had nothing to do with him, but their use of his identity created another headache for a brand already closely tied to his public image. For fans, the situation was confusing. Danny's face was instantly recognizable because of Counting Cars, making it easier for scammers to make the advertisements appear legitimate. Someone unfamiliar with the products could easily assume that the man behind Count's Customs had personally approved them. This became another unwanted issue for Danny, and as if that wasn't enough, history was not pleased. The network worried that repeated online controversies, paired with reports of internal turmoil at the shop, could reflect poorly on its programming. Around the same time, another problem was becoming harder for the show to escape. People were starting to question how much of Counting Cars was actually real. Reality television has always played with the line between real life and entertainment, and Counting Cars looked the same. Viewers began questioning the sudden car purchases, the negotiations, the dramatic discoveries, and some of the conversations between the cast. Reports later alleged that certain buying scenes had been arranged beforehand, and that some dialogue and situations were produced for television. However, that did not mean the cars or the work were fake. In fact, Kevin Mack strongly pushed back against that idea. In a behind-the-scenes interview, he said Danny fought to keep the show authentic because people who knew cars could spot a fake. Kevin maintained that the cars and stories were real and explained that this was one reason some episodes took so long to produce. Also, when the series premiered in 2012, it was a genuine ratings success. Its sneak preview premiere attracted 4.3 million viewers, making it history's biggest series premiere at the time. But as the years passed, that early excitement began to fade. The show no longer had the same appeal it once did, and questions about its declining ratings started to surface. Counting Cars had begun with millions of viewers watching each episode, but its audience gradually became smaller as the series moved into its later seasons. So, with the demanding schedule, growing questions around the show, and a changing audience all piling up, it became harder for Danny to keep carrying the same load. After years of doing it all, questions naturally began to grow about how long Danny could continue balancing all of it. However, when the cameras finally stopped rolling, the story did not end there. What happened to Count's Customs after Counting Cars disappeared from television, and what became of the world fans had followed for 10 seasons? The next thing after Counting Cars. When Counting Cars disappeared from television, it would have been easy to assume that Count's Customs disappeared with it. After all, for 10 seasons, viewers saw the Las Vegas shop through the same television lens. The cars, the restorations, the arguments, the deals, and the people inside the garage were all tied to the show. But the business itself did not end when the series stopped producing new episodes. In fact, Count's Customs still operates as a working custom hot rod and motorcycle shop, rather than a former television set. Its official website currently lists custom builds, vehicles for sale, motorcycles, merchandise, and museum tours at its Las Vegas location. The shop also continues to promote events and private experiences connected to the Count's Customs brand. That distinction is important because Counting Cars was always built around a real business. Without a new season, however, the shop's public image naturally changed. The official site promotes a collection of custom cars and bikes, vehicles associated with the old show, museum access, and tours rather than another weekly television episode. Visitors can see Danny's collection, and the shop offers a VIP experience that includes the Count's Customs showroom and other Las Vegas attractions. Danny Koker has also found another way to stay connected with his audience. In 2026, Count's Customs began promoting Count's Culture, a new podcast and video podcast hosted by Danny himself. The project moves away from the restoration format that defined Counting Cars and gives him a different platform to talk about the things he has always been known for, including cars, music, and the people he has met throughout his career. He also reunited with his longtime friend Rick Harrison on the Pawn After Dark podcast, giving fans an update on his life and career years after the show ended. There is also something else that survived after Counting Cars ended: the wider Counts brand. Counts Kustoms' official site lists Counts Tattoo Company, Counts Vamped Rock and Roll, the Counts 77 Band, a recording studio, merchandise, and other ventures alongside the automotive business. That means the identity created through television did not disappear when the series ended. It simply became less dependent on television. The shop has even kept part of the television history alive. Its website continues to advertise vehicles that were featured on Counting Cars, allowing fans to connect the real-world business with the builds they watched on screen. Reruns of the series also remain available through several television and streaming platforms, according to the shop itself. For a decade, viewers watched the shop through a carefully produced television series. After season 10, that window closed, but the garage itself continued to exist beyond the screen. The cars, motorcycles, museum, tours, merchandise, and other Count-brand adventures became ways fans could still experience the world that Counting Cars had made famous. Do you think Counting Cars should have ended when it did? And after everything that happened, could Danny Koker ever bring the show back? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.